the Larry Sanders
Hold on,
song.
let me find that for
Oh,
you.
we're live. We are live. I am joining you from my childhood bedroom on an iPad hooked up to a mic. So hopefully this works all right. But Barry Ritholtz is in his home studio in his beautiful home in Long Island, where he recently joined Paul Krugman from. And now he's joining me. The great Barry Ritholtz joins me today, and what a surprise it is to have you. Thank you for being here. Great to see
Well,
you.
you're
Lots
welcome.
to talk about. Lots to talk about.
What the change in Parliament with inherited dukes no longer being their version of senators? I mean, what else is going on besides
Yeah, I know that's a big story, and that's why I had you join in the last minute. I was like, we've got to talk about how Parliament has decided no longer do dukes and duchesses. I don't know. I don't know, and I don't care because I thought, there's a lot to talk with Barry Ritholtz about. There's so much, and so I'm sure there's a lot of questions people have. We're live. If you want to toss a question into the live chat, you can. But what are you looking up? Are you ready to go?
No, I'm looking up sovereign, heir apparent, royal family, peerage, duke. There's the duke and duchess,
Yeah.
the marquess and marchioness, earl, countess, viscount, viscountess, baron, and baroness. I didn't realize that the baron was the lowest rank of peerage and the duke was
I
highest. Who
can I
knew
get
these things?
can I get some credit for actually saying that before we went live? I said Baron was
Yes.
next. That was, and I had
No,
no idea.
so duke is next, baron is the bottom of the
Oh,
pile. You had it
oh,
back.
oh. Got it. Got
Well,
it. Well,
let's talk. What's going on?
let's talk. Uh, the one thing I learned from you at the very beginning and first talking to you was that markets hate uncertainty. And I'm
You didn't
wondering
learn
if,
that from me. I never say that. I think
and
markets thrive on uncertainty. When you see people on TV saying, "Oh, markets hate uncertainty," when is the future ever certain? We never know what comes next. And in fact, if you want to get deep and philosophical right off the bat, everybody trots out on TV and they make very, very self-assured predictions as to what comes next. The joke is often wrong, never in doubt. But when the shit hits the fan and we have no idea what comes next, people will come out and talk about, well, it's uncertain. What they're really saying is, hey, we never know what's going to happen, but now we have to admit, I can't even fake it. Who knows what comes next? So markets, listen, if there wasn't uncertainty, who would take the other side of your trade? If we know exactly that Microsoft is worth $157.50, why would I sell it for anything less? Why would anyone buy it for anything more?
right.
The inherent uncertainty of the future is, and in fact, markets arguably reflect all or nearly all of the information that's publicly available about any given stock or asset class. And sometimes people have different time horizon, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, when oil spikes to $114, when a few months ago it was 68 bucks, that's because, hey, we don't know what's going to happen with this war. Is the Strait of Hormuz going to be blocked? That's 20% of the oil that's shipped in the world. What happens? We don't know. A few tankers go down, it's going to be $150. There's a lot of uncertainty, and it gets manifest in prices to show uh, we just, normally you have a range of probabilities and you have a degree of confidence that here's the worst case, here's the best case, we'll end up somewhere in the middle. But when that goes like this and you have no degree of confidence where in a wider dispersion of outcomes, I don't want to get all mathy, but that's when people start talking about uncertainty because, hey, this could go any which way. Most of the time, most assets are trading within a range. You have some sense of where it's going. But, you know, a year. The reason forecasts are always so terrible, and always so many of them are so wrong. Nearly all of them are wrong, and even the people who are right, as often as not, it's just dumb luck and randomness. Is that a year is such a long time for something to happen, and something unexpected and unanticipated. In hindsight, of course, we should have anticipated an attack on Iran, but most people think, let me just, I got to go get some milk and eggs. The kids need to go to soccer. Like they just want to live their lives. Most people don't want to get drawn into, why are we trying to do regime change in Iran? What does that have to do with me?
So you gave us that framing of most times versus sometimes, and I feel like this has to be one of those periods of time where investors, where experts, economists are thinking this is very unpredictable because this could go so many different ways. And I'm not sure when the last time there was like this, but I do feel like I'm feeling very pandemic-y in terms of the range of ways this could potentially go. And it seems almost inevitable from everything that I've read and who I've talked to that this is going to go, this is the real thing, that Iran is going to really punish the world, and that China and Russia are with Iran. And it feels like this is going to be a while. It feels like gas is going to go up and up and up, and obviously the ripple effect. We can talk about that potential outcome, but you don't agree with my comparison to the pandemic-y feeling that I'm having?
Um, Not exactly, because
I lost my sense of smell and I feel warm.
when the pandemic happened, it was, the dominant thing and everything else was secondary.
You don't think that's right now?
No, because you have multiple vectors driving the global economy and the stock markets. And let's so before we start projecting out in the future, let me take 5 minutes and just kind of tee up how we got here, because I think it's kind of interesting, and I want to distinguish why, at least to me, this doesn't feel like a pandemic moment. This feels, there's a lot of rhymes with a bunch of things, but nothing precise.
Mm-hmm.
So first, as much hold aside the campaign chatter, Trump gets sworn to office in January 2025. He inherits a very robust economy and a stock market at all-time highs. Inflation, which had peaked at 9%, caused by many factors, one of which was the CARES Act, 1, 2, and 3. CARES Act 1, the biggest fiscal stimulus since World War II as a percentage of GDP, was Donald Trump. CARES Act 2, another $800 billion. The first one was $2 trillion. The second one was $800 billion, also Trump. And then the third one, about $1 trillion, Biden. When the first CARES Act passed, Jeremy Siegel of Wharton School, author of Stocks for the Long Run, highly regarded professor, immediately came out and said, this is so inflationary, we should expect 8, 10, 12% inflation over the next 2 years. And everybody kind of poo-pooed him. That basically, Siegel was saying, Trump just gave you inflation. And by the way, I think that was the right choice. If your choice is, hey, maybe we'll see inflation 8 to 12%, or we see unemployment, I don't know, 10, 15, 20%.
Right.
I choose inflation. And everybody hates it, but 20% unemployment,
The alternative is worse. It's like replacing one guy with a worse guy. But go ahead. Yeah. So there we go. CARES 2 and 3, also inflationary, but it peaks at 9 and he comes in at 2 or 3.
Well, he comes in at 3 after the Fed did what. By the way, I think inflation. See, several analysts had pointed out, when you get a sudden inflation spike, it tends to be symmetrical. The run up, whatever the reason is, will abate, and the run down will be similar. And we more or less saw that. So that was the first factor that we're dealing in. See, he inherits a robust economy and markets at all-time high, and then proceeds to engage in a series of policy decisions My opinion as to the validity or the intelligence of these decisions isn't relevant to our conversation. What is what were the results of that?
Right.
So the tariffs were inflationary. They led to kind of freezing all of corporate America. It affected their capital expenditure, meaning their investments. It affected their hiring plans.
Hmm.
And here we are a year later, and a month after the Supreme Court said, no, of course, this is illegal. It's in the Constitution. It's Article 1, Section 3, the power. And we talked about this, the power to tax, levy, duties, whatever. It doesn't say tariffs, but same group of things is to Congress. Now we can argue about why did they take so long to make an obvious decision, and they really allowed the economy to be disrupted to the point where, after having a huge, wildly successful labor market, 5 of the past 9 months have seen negative job numbers. Arguably, all of 2025 saw zero private sector growth. And in
It's a
fact,
crazy, crazy headline
self
that almost nobody knows about these revisions, and no one's certainly talking about last year's, what you're saying.
Oh, we're talking, people are talking about it. This is a very weird
In your
situation.
world.
Yes, which is, finance is not
Sure.
exactly a tiny sliver of
No, I'm just
American
saying, I'm thinking
economy.
about the public perception and politics, how it plays out. But go ahead.
Well,
On
the headlines grab the attention, and the subsequent revisions people don't pay attention to. So you're absolutely right about that. But the other factor that's so fascinating is, this is self-goal. This is a unforced error. There's no
Mm,
doubt about that.
mm.
So you have that set up, and it's 5 of the past 9, and I want to say something like 7 of the past 11 or 12. I don't want to misquote that. But not only are we running negative numbers for jobs, it's very weird that you have stocks at an all-time high. Nobody is really getting hired, but nobody is getting laid off. And can you have a jobless boom in the economy? So that's factor number one. Factor number two is, and this is a whole nother, my last conversation with Paul Krugman was on the rise of AI and the impact it's going to have.
Right.
And, one group of doomsayers say it's a bubble and the market's going to crash. The other group of doomsayers say it's going to put 15, 20, 25% of white collar workers out of business, out of job, and they'll stop contributing to 401k, and eventually the market will crash. The Luddites and the Malthusians have been wrong for centuries.
Right.
If ever a technology stands to really be super disruptive and perhaps put some people out of work, it's this one. And yet, here is the parallel to the pandemic. During the pandemic, we saw a massive spike in new company formations. Typically, what that means is a couple of college kids with a laptop and Amazon Web Services set up a company. They're creating apps, they're creating websites, they're creating tools and selling it to the public. And then after the pandemic ends, that kind of drifted down. What we are seeing today is the biggest spike in new company formations. So on the one hand, the unemployment rate for, I want to say it's 16 to 25, is double the national average. College graduates are having a harder time finding jobs right out of school. And a lot of them are saying, I don't need corporate America. I'm going to do this myself. And I don't know, I use 6 different AI products to play with, but my favorite is Claude and Cowork. And I can imagine, and if you're a little bit tech savvy, you could use Claude Code. And what used to take a year of 5 to 10 engineers and software programmers to build out a new app, a new company, a new website, a new whatever, is a couple of kids who are doing this over the course of days, not a year, weeks, but really days. And so I
So
think
those quote new businesses are a couple guys using. It's your point is that they're what, not that.
so that the threatened white collar Armageddon, I'm not so sure that that's going to happen. let me say it this way. I don't see evidence it's going to play out the way a lot of people think it is. Don't get me wrong. This is enormously disruptive. Go back 20 years when the internet really was and broadband was available. And what we had heard was, hey, we could hire lawyers, accountants, bankers in India for a tenth of what we're paying in America.
Mm.
And this is going to put all these people out of work. And it didn't happen because you can have them do certain types of work, but you really need locals, boots on the grounds to see that. I asked Claude to write me a legal memo about a contract I had been reviewing, and it was kind of egregious. Someone we wanted to hire that has a terrible, terrible non-compete. He's in New Jersey. His clients are in New Jersey. The company's in New Jersey. The contract insists on Florida law because Florida is very grifter friendly, predating Mar-a-Lago and all that. Every broker, every doctor that's lost his license, every broker that's been kicked out by the SEC wanders into Florida. The Homestead Act means no matter how much bad behavior you game in, you can't lose your house to litigation. So naturally, it attracts all the ne'er-do-wells and all the scammers and grifters.
But so Claude looked at that contract.
And I said, I think this is egregious. Why would a Canadian company want to apply Florida law? California is very employee friendly. Florida is very grifter friendly, very employer friendly. Huh. And so it's this horrific. And what would have cost me $25,000 with a white shoe law firm took 3 minutes with Claude Pro.
That's a pretty strong example coming from you and your industry and those figures. And so, but yet your point still is that you're on team totally very disruptive, but not replacing so many people's jobs.
Let me clarify that. 100% believe it's going to be utterly disruptive.
Yeah, it already is.
How many people are going to lose their jobs, and how many people are going to form other jobs in other businesses or related businesses? Is this a loss of 1%, 10%, 30%? I have no idea, and I'll let you in on a little secret. Neither does anybody else.
Okay, so that's about AI, and that's
a big factor that's been driving the stock market. Course. It's been driving corporate profits. It's been driving
That's why so many people are worried about and predicting a bubble, because it's been the driver of so many things. When there's other variables that you play,
this is so good it's going to replace 30% of the people. Well, if that's true, then shit, that's worth a lot of money. What do I have to pay for it? So it's hard to see it as both a bubble and a destroyer of jobs.
But now, you've taught us how. I think that one of the reasons why people like listening to and reading you is you simplify a lot of things where a lot of other people try to make them more complex, potentially to make themselves sound smarter. But the point I heard you say, if I'm going to apply your rules and tell me if I'm missing something, is this is kind of an unprecedented market to have it booming, yet there's no major job creation, although there's not major layoffs as well. And so then you said the variable that could be driving that aberration is AI. Is that what I'm hearing? These three variables?
Let me annotate that slightly. So it is almost never one thing. Anytime you have these big things, like the financial crisis was caused by blank, it was caused by a lot of things. And the top 5 all had a major. So right now we're still dealing with the hangover effects of the great financial crisis, because we spent 12 years underbuilding housing, single-family homes, right into the pandemic. And so we end up with a shortage of homes, which means home prices have gone up a lot. So that's number one. Number two, we're still dealing with the hangover of the pandemic. Rates went up after that spite of inflation. Surge of inflation caused by, in large part, the fiscal stimulus. So we're still dealing with everything is a little more expensive. Credit, mortgages, cars that have to be financed. So that's another factor. Factor 3 is the whole tariff nonsense and just freezing everybody in place. And all of this stuff is going on before we even get to the war. So there are 4, 5, 6 basic factors and another dozen secondary factors driving You have very negative consumer sentiment, and yet they seem to continue to be spending. You have a lot of concerns about the market. The market keeps going up. You have a lot of concerns about the economy. In the beginning of 2025, I said, on the one hand, we have, not the best and the brightest coming in to the White House. In fact, as we've seen, it's some of the worst and the dumbest.
Hmm.
But he's inheriting a great economy. He's inheriting a really good um, stock market. I see the chance of a recession very low in the first half of the year and, 15, 20, 25% in the second half of 2025, depending on what bad decision making we see.
Yeah.
And so then we saw the tariffs, and I said, hey, you do the math. Imports are not that expensive. The bigger problem are not that big a part of the economy. So the tariffs, that's not where the rubber meets the road. Where the rubber meets the road is corporate America kind of freezing. Remember the phrase warehousing labor? Like during the pandemic, people couldn't find workers. So they hired and overhired, and we're down to 4% unemployment. It's really full employment. Now people are saying, I don't know what the president's going to do next, so I'm afraid to build a factory. I'm afraid to open a new office. I'm afraid to do all this because who knows what the policies and the taxes are going to be. And secondly, I can not hire some junior people and just get a few folks to work with Gemini or Perplexity or ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude, and let's see what happens with that. And so you're not seeing people get hired because the confusion and the ability to replace them in part. It's not so much that you're firing people and replacing them with AI. It's that you're making each of your employees that much more productive and efficient. And it means you don't need to hire more people. At a certain point, the risk is, okay, we're doing this with 100 people. I think we could do this with 75 people or 50
So
people.
mostly what we're talking about is pre-war America and what has happened. Now we're walking
Now let's
up
talk
to
about the war. So
and let me just say we'll talk about the war in 1 second. Let me just refer to one comment in the live chat from someone who refers to himself as NorCal Casey. So I think he's in Northern California, but he says, I work in economic development, capital, all caps. Nobody is looking to build right now. And foreign direct investment is down 50% year over year from 24 to 25. Trump's effects on the economy will be felt for years, if not decades. Do you agree with that?
it's certainly a possibility. Look, I'll give you two examples. One is
nobody looking to build right now?
I wouldn't say nobody is looking to build. I think the people who are looking to build either offices or divisions or factories or whatever are waiting on trying to get special dispensation to make sure, hey, we're going to commit all this capital to this sector in this state. Are you going to fuck us with this? Are you going to change the rules for
Right,
the 10th time?
Yeah.
I can't take the risk that my shareholders are going to sue me because everyone's going to say, schmuck, why'd you do that? This guy is a complete wild card. Wait until, you got to at least wait till the dust settles. I don't know if that's a good lawsuit, but so we're seeing supposedly some motion in semiconductors, where medical labs, self-storage, multifamily apartments. These are not my favorite areas of growth, but that seems to be what's doing well now. Las Vegas traffic is down like 25% because the Canadians. So here's the problem with having a president who, remember, Obama wore a tan suit to the Oval Office.
Yeah, we refer to it often.
People lost their minds. And yet you have a president that's alienating. He's damaging brand America. He's alienating allies. He's alienating trading partners. He's doing all these things that, objectively looking at the impact of them from a nonpartisan perspective. Hey, if you're in Vegas and you voted for this set of policies, by the way, this is before we get to Minneapolis. This is before we get to ICE, this is before we get to 2025 is the first year in, I believe, American history where our population went down. So in addition to people illegal immigrants being deported, legal immigrants are leaving, and American citizens are leaving in
Yeah.
surprisingly large numbers. So that's another factor. Rising population tends to lead to economic growth. So if that's the case, what does declining population lead to? And then, the Canadians are not coming over the border. You speak to all the tourist areas.
Not only
Um,
Canadians, yeah,
oh,
tourism in general, right? Around the country.
Europeans, brand America has been damaged. I can't tell
Yeah.
you if it's permanent. I can't tell you how long it will take to repair it. Um, I think, and the general accepted wisdom is things have to get worse before they get better.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm hearing, and I
So
certainly.
that's kind of, I mean, to me, I
Well,
see a lot of these decisions, and I'm like, what is this team thinking? Wait, so now we're up to the Iran war
well,
from
hold
the
on. I want
team. Go ahead.
Well, before we get to the Iran war, there's one more question I really wanted to talk with you about. We've been talking about this forever. You and I both have a personal and professional fascination in energy, much less, more importantly, renewable energy. And,
Mhm.
just I'll never forget Meet the Press 20 years ago, maybe 15, on the run up to the Iraq war. Tim Russert has Thomas Ricks, who is an author, journalist, and expert on military, wrote a bunch of great books on his show. And basically, they're talking about terrorism and how to prevent terrorism. And Tom Ricks says, if you really want to prevent terrorism and not have to worry about wars in the Middle East, especially, we need to invest in renewable energy because it's all about oil. That was 20 years ago. You and I have been talking about renewable energy investments, where it's at technically for years. And I do just want to, ask about just kind of what could have been had the investments not been made earlier, had Republicans not stood in the way and the oil and gas industry stood in the way of all of the renewable energy investments. And obviously we've gone way backwards on that. What about where we are at, or
Surprisingly, we have not gone way backwards. This is the crazy thing. So first, good
we
news.
could be? No one knows how much further ahead we could have been had we
True.
really gone all
Absolutely
in the
true.
way that we do in other industries and subsidize other industries. But this has always been a controversial choice for any number of reasons. But go ahead.
So, yeah, the oil companies own a lot of Congress critters. I am a fan of the idea that senators and congressmen should have to wear, like
Yeah.
the F1 racers, they should have to wear a Nomex suit with all this
Citizens United changed everything. I have a clip from
100%.
you,
Yep, 100%.
that I used years ago, that Citizens United changed everything,
And
money and
it took
politics.
people forever to figure that, to come around
Yeah.
to that view.
I still talk about it all the time.
It was obvious to me at the time. But so let's talk about energy. And I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I may get these numbers off, but the general concept is right. So, first, you go back to the 1970s when we had the Arab oil embargo and a great recession and a giant inflation spike. Even though oil was like $6, $8 a barrel at the time, as opposed to today where it's over 100, um, energy as a percentage of any household's budget was about 11, 12%. It was pretty substantial. Today it's about half that. It's 5, 6, 7%. And when oil prices triple, when they go from $6 to $18, that has a big impact, especially when it's an eighth or a tenth of your budget. Going from a tenth to, a fifth of your budget means something else isn't getting paid that month for at least 60, 70% of the households in America. Today, the increase is unpleasant, but it's not, as devastating to the top 75%. If you're in the bottom quartile, this sucks and you're really feeling the sting and you don't know how you're going to pay your bills.
You're comparing the energy crisis of the 70s to where we're at right now today. Is that right?
Right. So you're
Okay.
starting out with a smaller percentage of the household budget with going to energy. That means gasoline for cars, heating, air conditioning, etc. And then the other thing is, hey, we were $68, $75. We're $95, $100. So it's a 20, 30% bop. Gasoline is probably up a buck and a half. That sucks. But it's not like gasoline going from 50 cents. I remember filling up my little red gas can for my lawn mowing business when I was 14, 13. And it was 39 cents. And then when it went up to like $1.09, I was like, oh my God, that's crazy.
When you
And
said that, I thought you meant now. I was like, don't you have
no, no,
like a
no.
young,
This
a young,
was
a young, a
100
young
years ago.
boy who does that for you at this point?
No,
But
that's me
okay,
doing it when I was a kid.
yeah,
So when the prices double and triple, it has a big impact. When
sure.
it goes I mean, when it's a smaller part of the family budget and it goes up 30, 40, 50%, it doesn't have the same impact. Plus, and this is the most significant thing, say what you will about fracking and methane escape and whatever, the US has moved primarily from oil and coal to natural gas and oil. That's been the change. And the US is now a net exporter of hydrocarbons, and we are not dependent on the Middle East for oil. So the entire geopolitical setup leading into the 70s, 80s, 90s was because we needed oil. And now North America is certainly energy independent, and the US is mostly energy independent, and we're exporting stuff to our allies, in quotes, in Europe, liquefied natural gas. And so if the price of oil out of the Gulf spikes to 100, 110, well, it's a global market. The price of oil in Texas is going to go up. But, nobody seems to really think that that's going to cause a recession here because, all right, the money at least is staying in the US. The major oil companies that are in Canada and Texas and California and offshore. So when the money doesn't leave, it has a different impact than when, all right, we're all paying a little more, but it's going to American companies, and it's sort of the velocity of money that will stay within the United States and circulate. We're moving money, we're moving pieces on the chessboard as opposed to sending those pieces overseas. So the impact is very different. Being energy independent means you're much less vulnerable. Like Japan is going to feel this because they import
Are you
100%
saying, if
of
what I'm
their
hearing you
energy.
saying is that we are energy independent, so this
It
war is going.
moderates the impact, at least initially.
I don't really understand how we're energy independent. I understood what you explained pretty well about how we're a net exporter, but and that's because of liquefied natural gas. But people don't put natural gas in their vehicles.
Very few do. Some buses and other stuff does,
Yeah, I
but
mean, but I'm saying like we still are dependent on oil, and I don't
and we
think that.
produce enough oil through
Yeah, but you
fracking.
don't. But all of the oil goes on the world market,
That's
so
right.
it's
So
not like our oil goes directly to us, and you can't just
we're
switch
not
that over.
really are we really bringing in oil from Saudi Arabia? No, it goes on the world market. And if that price goes up, our prices go up. But what I'm saying is it's much less impactful to a country who part of their economy is produced. The US is the world's largest producer of natural gas and crude oil. So as the consumers feel the sting of prices going up, and yet at the same time, the us as exporters, us as producers, our economy feels a positive effect of rising prices. Now, what somebody in the administration said was really wrong. Oh, this is rising oil prices are a net benefit to the US
Trump
economy.
said that. Trump said
Uh,
that.
so that is inaccurate because, well, it's a benefit to some sectors of the economy, namely the oil producers. It's a detriment to other sectors of the economy, namely consumers. And since there's a finite amount of money, every dollar you're spending, additional dollar you're spending on oil or gasoline, or for that matter, tariffs, is a dollar you can't spend at another retailer, is a dollar you can't
Right,
spend
right,
elsewhere.
right,
So
right.
for consumers, it's a net negative. For oil producers and sellers, it's a net positive. What he really should have said, but lacks the economic sophistication to articulate, is that when you are energy independent, the impact of rising oil prices is somewhat muted, somewhat dampened, because instead of it just being a cost like it is to Japan, it is both a cost and a benefit to one sector. But I don't want to go too far in the weeds with that. All that means is that the energy sector sees a net gain and everybody else sees a net loss.
I mean, the point there is obviously that it also well, I'm not going to make the political point yet. I want to stay with the economics of it all. But just going, right now, what are your clients most worried about? What are you watching? Is everybody just watching oil all day long? Are you
No.
watching the news? Bait and betting on what is going to happen. How freaked out are people right now, in general, as a
So
result of both the
before I
trade war, the changes in the Supreme Court's decision, what that might mean, his new 15% tariff across the board, and this war, which creates way higher energy prices for the world, which is a ripple effect on the world economy.
so
What are
so last energy point before we get to the war.
Okay?
Renewable power generation surged in the
Hmm.
US last year in 2025. And the reason for that is falling costs are making wind and solar much more competitive, regardless of what the administration policy is. US power renewable power use every year trends higher. It's going to beat overall power use, and from everything from AI to whatever, as well as renewables, continue to hit a new high. Last thing, when you get a chance, take a look at the new BMW iX3, which is their electric truck, which they dropped. This is a brand new truck. They dropped the price of it from the outgoing model by like 7 grand. It's a 500-mile range and it's 400 and something horsepower. So as much as the rest of the world has embraced electric, US has kind of embraced hybrids and faltered a little bit, in part due to the loss of the tax deduction. But all these companies have dropped tens of billions of dollars. They know the future. They're moving in that direction. And as long as solar and wind just keeps getting cheaper, it long ago passed coal. It's approaching nat gas, or maybe it's approaching oil and it hasn't quite gotten to nat gas. Strictly forget sustainability, forget climate change, forget anything.
Economics, capitalism,
It,
markets.
it's if you're running a big power plant and
Yeah,
solar is cheaper than coal, cheaper than oil, and soon to be matching nat gas, why the hell wouldn't you do it? Especially if you get to depreciate that. There's all sorts of tax benefits, even if the administration keeps killing it. By the way, the biggest state for solar is Texas, kind of a deep red state, which
is it
it's
really the
now
biggest state? What do you mean
for
by what
solar.
measure?
They're
By
the amount of energy produced, the amount of installations, solar, wind. Texas is giant. You don't realize how
So
big
solar and wind was they've had wind for 20 years, turbines, right? And
they just.
but
So
combined,
there's I have
it's
a
the
friend who
biggest.
runs a farm funds, and they're mostly in the
Hmm.
Midwest, but they're in California, they're in Texas. And one of the things that farmers have been doing is taking their least productive lands and putting up wind and solar, because it doesn't depend on the rain, the weather, this, how many days a year you're going to get solar. You know what the wind is going to look like. The problem isn't the rain, it's when the rain comes. Does it come too late? Does it come too early? Is it, you need rain the right time and not too much of it for crops. But for wind and solar, we just need the sun to come out X number of
Right.
hours, X number. So, anyway, that's the backdrop. Sustainables continue to do well, and major companies like BMW continue to devote resources to electric cars. So, we're the anomaly in the world. The rest of the world, China is just absolutely wind, solar, electric cars. They're the world leader. I hate to say this, after the 20th century was the US century, a series of incredibly bad decisions have
Yeah,
essentially, and not
yeah,
just this term of Trump or the previous term, I mean, collectively over 30 years, have teed up the 21st century as the China century. I mean, I
yeah,
think
yeah.
now the question is, do we maintain some degree of global superpower, or do we become Great Britain? That's the question. It's
Well,
not, will this be the Chinese century? It's, are we going to fade completely, or will we still, technologically, we're still very innovative, a big producer. That's our edge. But
I feel
you
like
know,
we're pretty, not knowing a lot. I feel like just based on what, things I've read and heard, that we're pretty far behind. And when they're a
in a lot of areas. Yep.
command economy with central, decision making, they can decide, like, snap the fingers, tomorrow we're building this, we're going all in. Meanwhile, America is in the past arguing about it because we have a democracy. And then it got worse because of campaign finance. And then it got worse because now we have an authoritarian leader who would, if he was a smart businessman and cared about people and was a good authoritarian, we might be doing a little bit better, but we don't want that. We don't want to be China, but we're not going to be as nimble as China is
There,
when it comes to making stuff and investing in what seems to be the future, in this case, of energy.
there's a great book I really always recommend, Americana: 400 Years of American Capitalism.
Mm.
And what this author's thesis, which I completely agree with, is just about every major technology over the past 400 years has begun as a public private partnership. Go
Mm.
down the list: telegrams, railroads, telephones, radio, TV, microwave, semiconductors. Uh, Listen, the vaccine mRNA for COVID started 15 years ago, and it was funded. The internet was funded by DARPA. AI has, and a number of other things, was an outgrowth of the NSA, or the CIA, I forget which. Even prediction markets post 9/11 was a CIA white paper that said, hey, if we have people betting on these events, it'll be a source of intel for us. Because as we saw in the Iraq war, someone making a bet right before the attack, with real money on the line, people who know will go out of their way and place money, to the point where it's an issue for the military. You're not allowed to do this because you're giving away our
Well,
tactics.
now there are those platforms,
Yeah,
Kalshi and
exactly. And
Polymarket.
Polymarket. Yep. So now we're up to the war.
Yeah,
So a series of unfortunate events, a series of
just
unforced
constant,
errors.
just shooting. One month you shoot yourself in the dick, the next month you step on a rake, and the next month you run your face into the wall. It's just over and over, just self-inflicted stupidity.
And sometimes the result, the manifestation of these errors fall on third parties. Like war planners shouldn't be using AI unchecked and relying on 15-year-old intel that
Right.
school.
Sure.
I mean, this is just seriously what you've described with shooting yourself in the foot and the stepping on the rake. This is the Three Stooges. And again, not the best and the brightest, not the A team. And here's where people kind of confuse this. On the one hand, and now we're up to the war, the execution of the plans by the military was fantastic, because we have a very disciplined, very well trained military that knows what to do when given their orders. The problem is higher up. The problem is the planning, the strategy, a lot of the tactical stuff that's done on the civilian side from the gang that came from the team that brought you the world's worst COVID response, brings you the Iran war. Like, at least, as much as I didn't care for George W. Bush, at least he had the courtesy of spending a year lying to us why we were
Right.
going into Iraq.
Well, he had to get public opinion on side, but maybe
It turns out that you don't. When you're an autocrat, you can just start bombing.
but before,
and having a complacent Congress that refuses, it's almost.
But look
like
at the
it's an
decision.
abused spouse.
Look at the decision making. Look at mine your studies of behavior and management and decision making. When you talk about the initial phase or the first couple of days, we have the best military. They did a great job. Yeah, they got precision munitions, but if they target the wrong school, in this case, the wrong target, which is a school, the back draft of that, the after effect is maybe a generation. But more importantly than that, mine your understanding of behavior for making zero plan for a thing. The Bush administration had a plan. It was pretty bad,
No,
and
they
it
didn't have a plan after they got rid of. They didn't have a plan for nation building. They had a
not a
plan
very
for
good plan.
regime
But they
change.
brought in the Coalition Provisional Authority. They got rid of the Baathists. They made a whole bunch of terrible choices
Mhm.
that did not work out, obviously.
Right.
But even that was a better plan than what these guys have, which is they killed an 86-year-old guy and replaced him with his son who just lost his family as well in that same attack. I mean, there's no plan. And more importantly, what I'm hearing a lot of people talk about is no one in the administration really brought up that Strait of Hormuz, which everybody who has ever studied the region knows about. I'm sure I'm wrong
There's,
about
as
that, but
I told you, as soon as the war started, I didn't tell you. I was talking to my head trader. As soon as the war started, I Googled Iran war plans because there's going to be a
yeah,
counterattack, and these are white papers online from a think tank, the U.S. Military Strategic Initiative, something like that, and literally what they're doing on in Iran, it has been a white paper for 15 years online. Anyone could Google it. They'll
yeah.
mine the Strait of Hormuz, and by the way, the mines today are much better than they were last
Oh,
time we
good.
did
Oh,
this.
great.
They're harder to dismantle. They have proximity fuses. It used to be you needed to be 100-ton ship to set them off. A diver swimming up to them to dismantle them will set the mine off. And
Hmm.
it's like that sort of crazy stuff. And lashing out at any ally in the region, just basically saying, mess with us and we're going to cause a global recession. And that is the bigger risk economically here. But look, during his first term, people called the president the Dunning-Kruger administration, meaning they didn't know what they didn't know. They were wholly unaware of their own skill set. Um, I think, I really think that the October surprise only works in October. Like if it's right there in the name. If you're going to start a military action, this shooting guns, planes, bombs thingy, it's not a war. Although this administration loves to create their own definitions of words. Part of the argument about tariffs are, well, this was an emergency. Well, here's the definition of emergency in the legislation. Well, no, the president says fentanyl is an emergency. It's no, there's a definition the legislation uses. Words have meaning. And so guns, bombs, planes, ships, killing, exploding, invading thingy, the rest of us call it a war. And the Constitution says the power to declare war lies with the Congress. Now, when the House Majority Leader is a lapdog, and when the president's party is terrified of standing up to him because they're going to get primaried, um, the separation of powers only works. The Constitution only works if people actually insist on following it. And so, when one branch of government has rolled over so their belly can be scratched by the president, well, we have a constitution. We just can't be bothered
So
with it.
take off your con law hat and put on your financial investor hat and
Okay.
tell me how worried you and investors are about where this goes over the next the gas prices, energy prices were always going to go up anyway because we're going into summer and everybody that's always the case, right?
It
I mean,
takes up a few cents. It doesn't go up a buck or
all
two.
right, so we'll put on your hat and tell me what you're thinking and how you're
So,
calming people.
so
You don't seem too concerned. I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
no, so there's a range of possibilities. I'll give you the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and then we move on. So, and by the way, what complicates this analysis is Iran is a really bad country filled with really bad leadership. They just killed, depending on who you believe, 10, 20, 30,000 of their own we lost our mind over ICE killing, what are we up to? 7 ICE deaths now. They killed, tens of thousands of their own protesters. This is a terrible regime led by evil, evil people. So complicating it is like, but do we want to be the ones to spend blood and treasure causing regime change and everything else? So best case scenario is we kill a few more leaders. which is very hard to do by air, but apparently they got his family. There's a revolute. We take out all of their air defenses, so they're completely vulnerable. We take out the Revolutionary Guard. There's an and the cops, because that
We can't take out the Revolutionary Guard. We can't do it.
so I'm giving you the best case
Robert
scenario.
Pape of University of Chicago has this paper. He studied every single air war ever, and it never results in regime change ever. If you don't put boots on the ground,
Hold
if you
that
don't have a
aside.
plan,
I'm setting my best case
I
scenario.
know
I'll
it
give you the
stinks.
worst case scenario. The
Your best case scenario already fell apart. You stink.
best case scenario is the protesters take to the street. There's a democratic
Not going to happen.
revolution, and there's solid regime change. What are the odds of that? Less than 5%. That's where I am.
Yeah, okay.
Now let's go the other. And by the way, price of oil drops down to $75. The economy avoids a recession, and we begin to re-accelerate over the next couple of months. So that's my best case scenario. My worst case scenario is this war goes on for months and months and months. That there is no. I'm trying to make sure this stops. That there is no pause in fighting anytime soon. That we're going to end up with a global recession, eventually leading to a U.S. recession. Oil, worst case scenario, goes to $200, $250 a barrel. Gas is $10 a gallon. Like, you can release as much strategic reserve as you want. You can waive.
Can't really affect it.
I saw some Congress. What an asshole. We should waive the 18 cents a gallon tax, federal tax, which hasn't gone up since 1991 and pays for highway maintenance. Just go away, you moron. It's just
because that's not going to make a difference to anybody's bottom line when they fill up their car.
If gas goes up $7, who gives a shit about 19 cents? And for my $10 a gallon gas, can my roads not cause flat tires and broken axles?
It's quite a trade-off.
So terrible, right? So just the stupid. There is no cure for stupid, and that's part of the problem. So that worst case scenario is global recession, market crash, like just a disaster leading to this is an emergency and we have to suspend elections in November.
Right.
I don't know. Like, we know that at least 3 assholes on the Supreme Court are just completely corrupt and should be impeached because of their this isn't like the tariff case was really easy. The good news is the dissent was so embarrassing that schmuck damaged his legacy and reputation. What has he been in there for? Less than 5 years? He is now, for the rest of his life, is the idiot who gave the president the roadmap for how to reinstall tariffs. Hey, fuckface, you're a sitting Supreme Court justice. You're not a junior attorney in the department, DOJ. Like, oh my God, what just stunning. In the winners and losers of the tariffs, the author of that dissent basically sealed his reputation. It's going to be really hard to. First rule of holes is stop digging. I don't know how this.
Well, I hope you're right. But this worst case scenario.
Will the Supreme Court basically say no? We didn't suspend elections. And by the way, John Roberts and the Chief Justice. Like, they realized, we gave Trump immunity in this crazy extrajudicial, extra legislative way, and he's just run amok. We're the last defense for democracy. Hopefully, these 9 morons have figured this out, or I should say these 4 morons have figured this out, and not take, like, it took them way too long to decide. That case was argued in November, and the next week there should have been a decision. I know that's not how it works, but they just dick this along forever.
Right.
So the concern is, are they so stupid that they're going to take 6 months to debate the suspension of elections, or are they going to say, under no circumstances? World War I, we had elections. Vietnam, we had elections. World War II, we had elections. You can't start a war and then say, the election I'm about to lose by 30%, we're going to suspend. So I feel terrible having to root for the Supreme Court to have a first-year law student understanding of the Constitution in order to protect the democracy, to protect the republic, but they have revealed themselves to be somewhere between incompetent and corrupt. The tariff situation was so obvious that even this collection of embarrassing, corrupt partisans
could potentially,
couldn't fuck it up. I hope the same is true about the elections, but there is a genuine chance that by the time they get around to it, they will have successfully run the clock out that he doesn't lose the House. And he knows if he loses the House, it's game over. Not only is he a lame duck, impeachment proceedings, every one of the worst and the dumbest in his administration is going to get impeached. Some judges are going to get impeached. It's going to be a shit show to say nothing of all the corruption that's going on with the family. I mean, every accusation is an admission. When you see the whole Hunter Biden nonsense, how do you get around to
the family is
and his own crypto coin and his own I personally think if the Supreme Court had any balls, they would say you cannot pardon somebody if it's shown to be corrupt, and you cannot pardon yourself, and you cannot waive any of this if it's with intent to defraud. And lots and lots and lots of people should end up in jail. And the whole concept of accusing the other side of lawfare is essentially an admission that we're doing a lot of stuff. He did a lot of bad stuff in his first term.
Unfortunately, America is not known for accountability, and I can never stop thinking about January 6th and what happened that day, and the fact that he wasn't impeached by the Senate, and the fact that he was reelected is how we got back to this place where you and I are talking today. And I'm about to run out of battery because I am in a makeshift studio here.
I see. So here's the last thought I want to say on this.
Go ahead. I've got 4%.
As much as some people say, hey, this isn't America's fault. This is President Trump's fault. The rest of the world looks at America and said, you saw this guy, he showed you who he was, and still 51% of your voters elected him. We just can't trust you anymore. That is the risk going forward. The biggest risk to the U.S. economy and the U.S. standing in the world is, listen, Germany did some bad things. They eventually rehabilitated themselves. North Korea, Iran, there's like a lot of bad players around the world. But you're supposed to be a democratic leadership. You're supposed to be, the shining city on the hill, and you're a bunch of rubes. How can we trust you? Oh, the price of eggs were high. Let's bring in the guy that really screwed up last time to see what sort of damage he can do. So that is my biggest concern, is what is the long-term possible effects? And again, I don't know what's going to happen. Here's the best case scenario. Here's the worst case scenario. Somewhere in the middle is, hey, the war ends sooner than later. It's not 6 months, but it's certainly not, this is 2 weeks. And it's not a global recession. Maybe the economy slows. That's the middle case, and then begins to get its act together. But a lot of things can go wrong. And when you look at the worst case scenario, and I don't want to leave on that, the worst case scenario is super ugly. The likely probability is somewhere between those two extremes. I just don't know, is it closer to the best case or closer to the worst case? The sooner the war ends, the better off we'll be. Full stop.
Barry Ritholtz, thank you for that last point. I think I could have made that one. The sooner the war ends. The decider is Iran, unfortunately, not us. That's what's interesting about this move versus the tariffs, versus all the other rakes that he has stepped on and way that he's shot himself. This one is not up to him, and I don't think he realized that.
Launching the war, I think they thought, and by the way, a lot of manipulation from Israel. And again, bad people in Iran. I get the motivation. You just want to see some competency and some planning for whatever geopolitical adventures we go on. And I want as few geopolitical adventures as possible. And I'll stop right there. The last thought, when the Iran war began, Onion had a headline that they trot out every few years. At long last, our period of peace and prosperity is finally over, in an amusing way, and I'm concerned that we're looking at something similar here.
It's a funny way to deliver terrible news. Thank you very much for joining me, as always, my friend. And thanks everybody for watching live. Go follow Barry everywhere on social media, listen to his podcasts, and read his blog, which he still maintains, which is still very popular. And thank you very much. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Pete. Stay safe, and let's hope we all can help each other and get through this sooner rather than later.
Bye, everybody.